talk about some things at lunch, and we can go over some things at lunch. The jurors ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Your Honor, if I could, this will take a second. Not even a discussion. I filed the trial brief that the court asked about in terms of the comments related to taking financial responsibility for medical bills. I filed it earlier this morning. I brought courtesy copies for everyone. I can give one to the defense.
Give that to me at lunchtime.
Sounds good, John. I'll give it to the defense now. Just okay. Joe, you need more than one? All right, Joe, you need more than one? Thank you.
Please rise for the jury. Please be seated.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you as always for your service and patience. We very much appreciate both. Defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, we are. The defense would call Dr. Henry Wren to the stand.
Step this way, sir. You will remain standing, raise your right hand, please. Be sworn in.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Henry Lynn, Henry H-E-N-R-Y, Lynn, L-I-N.
Yes, thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Dr. Lynn, can you introduce yourself to the jury briefly?
Yes, hi, my name is Henry Lynn. I'm a pediatric transplant hepatologist, and I have 15 plus years treating children with pediatric liver conditions. And
Can you, before we get into it, can you give the jury just a little bit about your medical education and training?
Yes, sir. So I completed my medical school at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. Afterwards, I realized I really enjoyed taking care of children and their families and decided to pursue a career in pediatrics. I did my pediatric residency training at Northwestern University of Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. While I was there doing residency, I developed an interest in pediatric liver disease and pursued additional training in pediatric gastroenterology, hepatology, and nutrition. So it's a combined training where you get exposure to all three fields. That was a 3-year fellowship at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, after which I decided I wanted to pursue even more training and subspecialized in pediatric transplant hepatology or pediatric liver disease. So I did a 4th-year fellowship training back at Northwestern University at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, and then embarked on my career in academic medicine.
Do you currently, do you hold any board certifications?
Yes, sir. So I'm board certified in pediatrics, in pediatric gastroenterology, hepatology, and nutrition, and then I have separate board certification for pediatric transplant hepatology.
So let's talk a little bit about your career path after you were board certified. Where did you start working as a doctor?
So after I finished training, I was initially recruited back to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to work as part of their pediatric liver transplant team. I spent the first 5 years of my career there, and during my time there, I eventually was recognized for my efforts and made an associate director of the pediatric liver transplant program there. In that role, I took care of children both pre and after their liver transplant.
Where are you currently working at?
So I'm currently at the Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, in Portland, Oregon. I was recruited there from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to lead the pediatric gastroenterology team and to bring some pediatric liver expertise to the institution.
Okay. And Dr. Lynn, have you ever been published in any medical journals?
Yes, sir. As part of being in academic medicine, publications and scientific endeavors are part of what we're asked to do. And so I've both published and presented in pediatric liver disease.
Okay. And can you estimate how many articles you've published over the course of your career?
I think I have a little over 60 publications.
Okay. And you mentioned that you published about pediatric liver disease. Do you have any, have you sorry, strike that. Let me ask you a better question. Has your research and your articles focused on a specific area of pediatric liver disease?
Yes, so some of my research has been focused on pediatric liver transplant, and in particular, what happens before and after the transplant. I also focused on pediatric liver disease in general, studying many different conditions. And a sub-focus of some of my research has been on the communication process with families. And in pediatrics, one of the biggest hallmarks is being able to communicate what's going on effectively with families and understanding their experience and how to partner together.
Mark, can we get the next slide, please? Doctor, can you just briefly give the jury an overview of your main opinions, and then we'll discuss them in a little bit more detail?
Yes, sir. So in a review of the medical records that I was provided, say all of the children that I reviewed the records that they developed acute liver failure, unfortunately, from real water consumption. It looks like in the review of the medical records that all of the children have recovered from their episode of acute liver failure, and there's no ongoing evidence of liver injury, and it does not seem like they're seeking ongoing care for the acute liver failure episode. And I think some of the recommendations that have been put forth here in terms of long-term screening after an acute liver failure episode, such as checking labs routinely, are very reasonable.
Mark, can you go on to the next one? Okay. Now, doctors, the jury's already heard a little bit from Dr. Hudson and Dr. Datnow about what acute liver failure is. Can you just give them a quick reminder of what acute liver failure is?
Yes, sir. So pediatric acute liver failure, there's a specific definition, which means that in the absence of a pre-existing liver condition, so you don't have a known liver disease, that you develop injury and failure of the liver. There's a definition where effectively you look at one blood test, which is the INR. The INR is a measure of clotting. This is made by the liver, and so when your liver is not functioning well, you don't make clotting factors, and by default, then the INR rises because you're not making the factors that this test measures. So the definition of pediatric acute liver failure is you have to have two parts. You have to have the absence of pre-existing liver condition, and then you need to have an INR greater than 2, or you have an INR greater than 1.5 with hepatic encephalopathy. That basically means that you have mental status changes or you're lethargic, suggesting that you have some consequences of liver failure.
And Doctor, what, in your opinion, are the most important markers or tests for determining when a person has started to recover from acute liver failure?
So there's many blood tests that, as a clinician, I'll check if I see someone with liver injury or liver failure. By and far, the primary marker I look at is that INR level, that's that clotting factor level, because it's a measure of actual liver function. Some of the other labs that we look at but don't play as strong of a role, but certainly still want to see them improve, include those markers like AST and ALT.
And as far as resolution of acute liver failure, what tests or markers would you look for then?
So twofold. Again, I want to see that INR level return back down to normal. So normal INR is usually less than 1.2, so I want to see that number having gotten down to that normal reference range. And I would also like to see the AST-ALT recover as well. I will say that AST-ALT, they're like a marker of liver irritation, and so once that irritation has been removed and the liver's recovered, you should expect that AST-ALT to drop. But when you're talking strictly pediatric acute liver failure, you're really looking at the function of the liver, which means you need to have that INR, that liver function measure, recover.
Okay. Can we go on to the next slide? All right, Doctor. Let's first, can you give the jury, once again, the jury's kind of heard a little bit already, can you give the jury an explanation of what fibrosis is?
Yes, sir. So fibrosis, as the term, it just means scar tissue in the liver. There's a grading or staging of fibrosis from 0 to 4. So I think of 0 as you don't have any scar tissue in the liver. and 4 means you're in that irreversible stage. That's cirrhosis is the other term we use. Scar tissue develops because you have some underlying irritation that then leads to scar tissue. The example I usually give my patients is I'll say, if you have a rash on your hand, you keep on scratching at that rash, you're irritating that area on the skin, it's going to get irritated red, and then if you stop scratching at it, it'll get better, right? But if you keep on scratching at it, that skin's going to toughen up, and over time you're going to develop a little bit tougher skin, which is kind of like that scar tissue. And so the way I think of it is fibrosis develops, that scar tissue develops when you have ongoing irritation, and the goal is to stop that ongoing irritation to hopefully prevent the progression of fibrosis.
And generally speaking, how is fibrosis diagnosed?
So the gold standard historically of diagnosing fibrosis is by liver biopsy. Fibrosis is looking at scar tissue specific to the liver. The only way we have to really look at the liver is by taking a piece of liver via liver biopsy, looking at that tissue under a microscope and seeing is fibrosis present. There are some newer technologies that we're using, such as the ultrasound fibroscan, to really help look for the degree of fibrosis. How the ultrasound works, without getting into too much details, it just measures how stiff the liver is. And so if you think of it, if the liver is stiffer, then it could be stiffer because you have more scar tissue in it. But you have to take those findings in with a grain of salt, because sometimes there can be other factors that make the liver stiffer. That said, I think there's a lot of good research there that helps correlate certain fibrosis measures when you're doing the fibroscan. So certain fibroscan measures, I guess I should say, with the degree of fibrosis. And so we're learning how better to use that. But the definitive measure, sir, is to look at histology.
Okay. In terms of histology, earlier, or last week, the jury heard from Dr. Datna, who is a pathologist. Are you a pathologist, sir?
No, sir, I am not.
Okay. And when you read a liver biopsy, is that something you would do with the pathologist?
Yes, sir. So usually if I order a liver biopsy, I'll read the result, and I try to do it in my practices to review that result with the pathologist. But and I look at the slides under the microscope with the pathologist, but I'm really relying on their expertise to help inform me of what they've written in the report. I like doing that because sometimes you have specific words in the report that it could be interpreted one way or another. So I think being able to know the pathologist you're working with to say, hey, if you're using this word, this is what it really looks like under the microscope, and that helps you make clinical decisions.
And you can hydrazine cause fibrosis? I'm sorry, strike that. I just slaughtered that word. Can hydrazine cause fibrosis in some patients?
So all I know is what I've seen in the literature, and it seems like in some cases it can lead to fibrosis, yes, sir.
And what is the prevailing opinion regarding the repair of fibrosis in pediatrics?
Yes, so in general with fibrosis, if you go back to, you have that range from 0 to 4, 0 being no fibrosis, 4 being cirrhosis, or irreversible fibrosis. Anything in between, 1 to 3, there's an opportunity to reverse that fibrosis. The way I think of it is, if we go back to that example which I gave about, you have a rash on your arm, your hand, and you're scratching at it. Well, if you stop scratching at it, if you stop irritating the liver, then the fibrosis has a chance to reverse. Fibrosis develops because there's ongoing irritation to the liver. So if you stop irritating the liver, the fibrosis should reverse.
Okay. And what are you basing this opinion on?
So it's based on my clinical experience. There's examples of reversal of scar tissue in many different pediatric liver conditions. One example I give is pediatric autoimmune hepatitis. It's a liver condition in which you get irritation and inflammation to the liver. These children can have present with fibrosis as well, and as long as you're not to that cirrhosis stage, that stage 4, if you treat the underlying autoimmune hepatitis, stop that inflammation, and you do repeat biopsies, what we'll see is first the inflammation will go away, and then sometimes that fibrosis actually goes away with it because we've now stopped irritating the liver.
Now, can you explain to the jury why one person's biopsy result is not necessarily applicable to another patient?
Yes, sir. I'll try my best, but I think the main thing is every patient is a little bit different, and again, going back to that example I just gave of autoimmune hepatitis, you could have that same condition, and if I do a biopsy, you could have varying degrees of inflammation, irritation, or fibrosis, even though your liver labs, the blood work that we checked, could initially look very similar. Just how you react to it is a little bit different.
Yeah. Mark, can we go to the next slide? Before we talk about Mr. Morales, Master Morales, I'm sorry, he's a minor. The 5 children in this case were all treated at Primary Children's Hospital in Utah. Are you familiar with that facility?
Yes, sir.
And they were treated by a man named Dr. Guthrie. Are you familiar with Dr. Guthrie? I
know Dr. Guthrie professionally through listening to him talk and at different meetings, sir.
Is Dr. Guthrie well regarded in the community?
Yes, sir, he is. He's a well-respected pediatric hepatologist.
And based on your review of the records for the 5 children in here, was Dr. Guthrie's treatment of the children appropriate?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
And they were well cared for?
Yes, sir.
Now let's talk about Severin Morales. First, let's start with what records did you review for Severin Morales?
For Severin Morales, I reviewed the available medical records that were provided to me. So that includes the care he saw from his pediatrician to the time he presented with the episode of acute liver failure to whatever was available after his recovery.
And what did those records show you, doctor?
I think, again, it showed me that he definitely had acute liver failure by that definition of that INR being elevated and having the elevated liver enzymes. It showed that, and unfortunately he had acute liver failure, but he recovered from acute liver failure, and in the follow-up medical records that I saw, there really wasn't any other indication of ongoing liver injury or irritation. His blood work had shown that his liver enzymes, that AST, ALT, had resolved. That INR, that clotting factor that we look at as a marker of liver function, that had normalized. And so, by review of the medical records, it looks like he has resolved, that episode of acute liver failure has resolved.
Did you review, let me ask you this. As part of the records you reviewed, did you review Severin Morales' biopsy report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can you explain to the jury what was in that report?
So that report, again, you're reading, that pathologist's interpretation. It said that there was triaditis, which is, itis means inflammation, so it means that there's ongoing inflammation in the liver, certain areas of the liver. You see this in acute liver injury. They had some periductular cholangitis, I believe, and again, it's a medical term basically saying there is other inflammation, irritation in other parts of the liver itself. I believe those were the 2 main findings that I can recall, sir.
Okay. Now, after Severin was discharged from Primary Children's Hospital, did the record, sorry, let me ask you a little bit more open-ended question. Following his discharge, what did the records show for Severin Morales?
So like I mentioned, the records showed that he recovered with the liver enzymes going back down to normal, that INR, that clotting time going back down to normal as well, and no further mention of ongoing signs or symptoms of liver disease. Sometimes you can, if you have chronic or long-term liver disease, you have other physical signs that you can see, things like you look jaundiced or yellow, you have a big spleen, those types of physical exam findings, which I did not see mentioned in the review of the records.
Based on your review of the records, is Severin Morales continuing to seek any treatment related to his acute liver failure episode?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so, sir.
So is it fair to say your opinion is Severin Morales has recovered from his liver injury?
Yes, sir.
Mark, can we go to the next slide, please, sir? All right. Lyric Williams, and I'm going to apologize to the jury. This is going to be a little bit repetitive but Dr. Lynn, what records did you review for Lyric Williams?
For Lyric, I also reviewed her medical records that were available, including the records available before and after the episode of acute liver failure, as well as the records during that time.
Okay. And what did your review of Lyric Williams' records show you? revealed to you?
Again, that she had an episode of acute liver failure. That episode of acute liver failure resolved, and based on the most recent labs, again, the AST, ALT, those liver enzymes had normalized. The clotting time, that INR had also come back down to normal. And so, and you know, clinically, it seemed like she has been doing well, and so it seems like she's recovered from the episode of acute liver failure.
And you've reviewed some of Lyric's follow-up records as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do the follow-up records show any indication that she's continuing to receive treatment related to her acute liver failure episode?
Not in the records I reviewed.
Okay. Is there any evidence, let me ask you, during your review of Lyric's medical records, was there any evidence of fibrosis or scarring on her liver?
No, sir, not that I saw. Again, I would say, the gold standard of assessing for fibrosis is going to be by liver biopsy, and I don't believe it. In my review records that I saw that she had a liver biopsy. Sometimes if you have very progressive fibrosis, you're getting into that stage 4 cirrhosis area, you can have imaging findings of fibrosis or cirrhosis, and that's by ultrasound. And I don't believe her ultrasound made mention of that to my recollection.
Next slide, please, Mark. All right. Now, London Williams. Once again, what records did you review for London?
The same ones, the medical records before, during, and after her acute liver failure episode.
Okay. Oh, excuse me. And what did London's medical records reveal to you?
That she had acute liver failure, and that she has also recovered from that episode of acute liver failure. Again, liver enzymes, the AST, ALT, the INR there, normal from what the records I was provided.
Okay. And once again, did your record review reveal a biopsy for London?
No, sir.
Okay. And so is it fair to say there's no evidence of fibrosis or scarring for London liver?
Yes, sir, based on the records I reviewed.
Okay. Next slide, Mike, please. Christopher Wren. Now, once again, you reviewed, can you explain to the jury what records you reviewed?
Yes, sir. I reviewed his medical records before, during, and after the episode of acute liver failure.
Okay. And what did those records show you?
That he had acute liver failure, that it looked like his liver was recovering. I believe the most recent set of labs that I saw showed that the AST, ALT were still elevated, but trending down. As with that INR, which is that marker of liver function, I think there was a recommendation for follow-up labs, but I did not see those in the record. But I believe in the medical records that I was provided, there really wasn't any other mention of signs or physical symptoms of ongoing liver injury, despite not having available labs to review.
And finally, next slide, hair carrier. Once again, what records did you review from this carrier?
Very similar to the medical records before, during, and after the episode of acute liver failure.
And what did those records show you, Dr. Wren?
That she also had an episode of acute liver failure. In her case, that she recovered. Again, the AST, ALT had normalized, as well as that INR, and that she has recovered from the episode of acute liver failure.
And did you have an opportunity to review Kara Carrier's biopsy report?
Yes, sir. As part of the workup for her episode of acute liver failure, she actually had a liver biopsy as well. And I believe that biopsy report showed some inflammation as well, but no mention of fibrosis that I saw in the report.
Okay. The jury has also heard a little bit that Hera has some ongoing orthopedic issues regarding her knees. Do you have any opinion as to whether that's related to her acute liver failure episode?
I'm not sure. What I can tell you is that in review of the records, it looked like that she was seeking care for that knee issue before that episode of acute liver failure. So it seems like those symptoms might have predated that episode.
Okay. And should we go to the last slide? And doctors, once again, just to kind of summarize, and I need to pull this up because I can't read that. Your main points, can you just kind of give the jury a quick summary of your main points again?
Yes, sir. So again, it's very unfortunate that all of these children had an episode of acute liver failure by real water. They have recovered from it, and when I say recovery, it's just normalization of your liver labs, including that INR and that liver function test. When you've recovered from acute liver failure, and again, assuming that you don't have a pre-existing chronic medical condition, then you should not be at any increased risk for developing another episode of liver failure, another episode or other liver disease. And it seems like in the review of records, they're no longer receiving ongoing care for the episode of liver failure. I think, with my parent hat on, even though I can sit here and say, you're not at increased risk for liver failure after an episode once you've recovered, I think it's very reasonable to hope for ongoing screening and monitoring. And so I think the recommendations that have been put forth in terms of routine screening of liver enzymes seems very reasonable. If those liver enzymes were abnormal, had other concerns, one of the next steps I would consider would be imaging such as the FibroScan. I think the other piece to it too is just there's the physical recovery from acute liver failure, and then there's that mental emotional toll. I see this a lot in the patients I take care of, and I can't even begin to imagine what that's like. I know in my own personal practice, we really work closely with our psychology team and really try to build that support system, for the patient, for the child. And so I think, having a good family support system is absolutely integral. And we also know that, parents also go through that experience as well. And so the recommendations for having counseling available or a psychologist available to work with the family, I think is absolutely important. And I think that's a very reasonable place to start.
Thank you, doctor. I have no more questions for you at this time. Pass the witness. Okay. Now, can we approach? Sure.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Dr. Wren. How are you?
Good, how are you, sir?
I am good. I don't believe we've ever met.
That is correct.
I didn't know if that was me or someone else.
That was me, Teddy. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Dr. Lynn, I want to start with some things that I think you and I can agree on. Okay?
Yes, sir.
And if you believe that I'm wrong, please jump in and tell me, no, Mr. Parker, I can't agree to that. But let's see if we can agree to a few things, okay?
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna start with the easy ones.
Yes, sir.
We can agree that real water caused every child, part of this case, to suffer from acute liver failure. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we could agree that every child, as a result of drinking real water, be it through formula or through cereal in some form of formula cereal, I guess, in a bottle, or just drinking water by itself out of a bottle, or drinking out of a cup. However they decided to drink it or use it, that caused their acute liver failure, correct?
Yes, sir. It's my opinion that real water led to these episodes of acute liver failure. Yes, sir.
Can we also agree, and I'm going to back you into this later on in this discussion, but can we also agree that to the extent that they have any scarring on their livers, any permanent damage, and I know you may not agree or know for certain that is the case, but to the extent that they do have permanent injuries to their livers, can we agree that real water caused those permanent injuries?
Can you define what you mean by permanent injury, sir?
Yes, sure. Some form of fibrosis.
Objection. This takes his testimony.
It seems like for some of the patients with when you have liver biopsy, based on some of the testimony that I've read, in the transcripts that there's thought that there might be fibrosis on those biopsies. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And to the extent that fibrosis presents a permanent issue, that was caused by real water, correct?
I don't know if I agree with the term permanent, but again, liver injury, the acute liver failure was from real water, yes, sir. And you can get fibrosis as part of an episode of acute liver failure, yes, sir.
And is it fair to say that you're not giving an opinion today on behalf of real water that fibrosis was not caused by the hydrazine in real water?
Yes, sir. I'm not giving that opinion. I don't know if that's a yes or no, but I'm not giving that opinion.
Perfect. Ms. Shoulders?
Yeah, it's interesting.
It was. So those are two things we can agree to. I believe you also agree that Dr. Hudson's recommendations related to perhaps fibroscans in the future for these children would be appropriate.
When clinically indicated, yes, sir.
Right. Which means you would have to follow them clinically, correct?
Yes, sir.
Which means they'd have to go see a doctor, correct?
Yes, sir. Whether it's your pediatrician, or a specialist, someone should screen those liver labs. Yes, sir.
That's right. So in terms of permanency, to determine if there is, you'd have to see a doctor. That doctor would have to refer you to a pediatric hepatologist, and then that hepatologist would have to give you the diagnostic test, correct?
I don't believe not necessarily, and the reason why I say that is because as a hepatologist, once you've recovered from the episode of liver failure, I give the families the option, and sometimes I say, would you like to continue to follow with me? I talk to their pediatrician. I think there was one case where, I don't remember who, but there was a recommendation by the specialist in the review of the records that said, follow up, they discharged them from their practice, presumptively, to your point though, to follow up with the pediatrician with that screening.
All right. So with or without a referral, you're still saying the bottom line is true. We can agree that some doctor, be it a pediatrician, deciding that the pediatric hepatologist can continue monitoring, or going to a pediatrician and then a pediatrician referring them to a pediatric hepatologist. But some physician would have to be involved in continued monitoring, correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, if you're ordering a blood test, some physician should be involved in that care, absolutely.
And that additional care would have been caused by real water's consumption of real water, correct?
Yes, sir, as it pertains to the acute liver failure.
The same with Dr. Sands. You were familiar with Dr. Sands?
The psychologist, I believe.
The neuropsychologist?
Yes, sir.
And Dr. Sands also recommended additional monitoring in the future for emotional and mental issues, correct?
I believe that was a recommendation, yes, sir.
And you believe that to be not only reasonable and important, correct?
I think it's absolutely important to be able to monitor from a mental health standpoint. Not being a specialist, I don't know what the right frequency of monitoring that should be. I think at baseline there should be at least an initial assessment, and then depending on what is found at that assessment, I would defer to the specialist on their recommended frequency of monitoring, for lack of a better term.
So at this point, you would agree with me that perhaps because you're not a psychologist or psychiatrist or neuropsychologist, you would defer to Dr. Sands and Dr. Sands' recommendations.
Objection, beyond scope.
I would defer to my medical team. As a pediatric hepatologist, I work with a psychologist, and and oftentimes, instead of just taking their word for it, I have a dialogue with my psychologist to really understand what their concerns are. Understanding sometimes I'm thinking you might need more or less monitoring, so it's really a partnership between them.
Eventually, the psychology efforts would be undertaken by the psychologist, correct?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
That would not be within your wheelhouse, correct?
No, sir.
All right. So in terms of what I asked you earlier, that you would defer to Dr. Sands, the actual psychology treatments, the monitoring, the determinations of progress would be made by a psychologist, correct?
Yes, sir, I would defer to a psychologist.
Thank you. So now let's talk about deferring. I believe you indicated previously that you're not a pathologist, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, and typically you would rely upon the expertise of the pathologist to determine what a biopsy slide presented, correct?
Yes, sir, in general, but again, I would, as I mentioned, my typical practice is I get the report, I review that report with the psychologist and look at the slides together to really understand what's reporting.
Okay, let me help you with that last comment. I think you meant you sit down with the pathologist, not the psychologist, right?
Oh, yes, sir, I apologize.
Okay, no worries, we're here to work together. So, Dr. Wren, you would defer, and I don't want to talk about the report right now. And you know something, let's explain it to the jury. There's a difference between a report and a slide, correct?
Well, yes, and one is, the report is the written description of what the pathologist sees on the slide.
All right. And so is it fair to say that typically you're not evaluating the slides, you're getting the result of the pathologist's review of the slides?
Yes, sir, and then I look at the slides with them to better understand what's going on. But again, I'm not a pathologist.
All right. And in terms of reviewing and identifying what is presented in the slide, you typically defer to an actual board-certified pathologist, correct?
Yes, sir. Again, we work together to understand what has been seen.
Yes. All right. Now, you gave an example, I think twice, about scratching a rash on your hand.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I want to, while you were saying it, I was thinking about how far I could take that analogy. And I thought to myself, what can you and I agree that could also perhaps change your opinion of that example? Would you agree with me that hydrazine is a toxin?
Yes, sir. That's what the literature says.
Would you agree with me that hydrazine, being a toxin, is also caustic?
Again, I'm not a toxicologist, but yes, that's what the literature says.
Would you agree with me that if you were to pour a caustic fluid onto your hand, as opposed to simply scratching it, you could cause permanent damage to the skin on your hand?
It depends on the nature of that substance, but I think that is a possibility, yes, sir.
And would you also agree with me that it's possible, if not probable, that if a caustic fluid was poured upon your hand, that could leave permanent damage where your skin never fully recovers, the way it was before you poured that substance on you?
Again, I think that's a possibility.
All right. So now, with that analogy in mind, would you agree with me? Let me ask you this, because I'm not sure if you've seen this before. Have you seen a liver removed from a person that has suffered damage, acute liver failure from a toxin?
Not from a known toxin, no, sir.
All right. And I appreciate that distinction. You agree with me that hydrazine is a known toxin?
No, sir. Yes, sir, to that, but what I was saying is I've seen livers removed from children with acute liver failure who's needed a liver transplant. Sometimes you don't know what the cause is of acute liver failure, and so when you don't know what it is, I can't tell you with certainty that I have or haven't seen a liver removed from someone with exposure to toxin. That's what I meant.
Okay. So you agree with me that hydrazine is a toxin, is a known toxin, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what the literature says.
It's a known toxin to the liver, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what the literature says.
But in your experience, you've not seen a liver that's been removed from a child that's actually suffered from a toxin like this. Is that fair?
Yes, sir, but what I will say is in acute liver failure, for example, and again, one of the causes of acute liver failure in children can be from Tylenol toxicity.
Could be
so
what?
Tylenol, like
Tylenol,
too much Tylenol, right? Acetaminophen, yes, sir. So I have seen that before. So I don't know if that's what you're asking.
All right. So we know that acetaminophen, Tylenol, is a form of DILI because it is drug-induced liver injury, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. It's probably the most prominent.
Yes, sir. One of the
In
most
children?
common. Yes, sir.
Because certainly they're not drinking alcohol, which would be another form of acute liver failure because of alcohol in adults, correct?
No, sir, I would not call that a form of acute liver failure. That would be liver failure from long-term exposure, sir.
All right. But we know these children weren't drinking alcohol.
Yes, sir.
All right.
That's based on our review of the literature, of the records.
All right, good enough. And typically, as a pediatric hepatologist, you're not treating children for alcohol abuse.
No, sir.
All right, so with these children, we know they suffered acute liver failures caused by real water, which included a known toxin, hydrazine, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we also know that we know the type of damage a known toxin can cause to the liver, correct?
I'm sorry, can you explain that again?
Sure. We know that a liver toxin can cause fibrosis, correct?
It can, and it can also cause inflammation with no fibrosis.
All right. We know it can cause bridging fibrosis, correct?
Sure, yes, I think that's a possibility.
And potentially cause cirrhosis, correct?
In general, with cirrhosis, you would need long-term exposure, but yes.
And in fact, it can cause death, correct?
Sure, I think in some cases it could, yes, sir.
Well, you've read the literature showing that hydrazine has been linked to the death of someone, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what's in the literature for hydrazine, sir.
I'm sorry.
That's what's in the literature for hydrazine. Sir.
Hydrazine.
Yes, sir.
That's right. And you're also familiar with the literature that one person exposed to hydrazine for less than 1 minute suffered acute liver failure. You've read that literature, correct?
I've read that literature, but I'm not sure that literature said acute liver failure. If I recall correctly, that literature shows that they have elevations of the AST-ALT, as well as elevation of the creatine phosphokinase, which is a marker of like muscle breakdown that sometimes can be elevated in liver injury. I don't believe that article mentioned the INR, that clotting factor, which is by definition, when you're looking at function of the liver, you're really looking at the INR.
Yes.
So I would say it looks like that patient, if I remember correctly,
And we'll
that
get
was
to it.
4 people, one of whom had elevated liver enzymes, so I would say they had acute liver injury, sir, not failure.
All right, we'll go with that. And let's talk about the literature, Dr. Lin.
Yes, sir.
All right. You've reviewed the Exhibit 376. Let me start with that document. I spoke to Real Waters Council earlier about this yesterday, Your Honor, and confirmed it this morning. I believe there should be an objection to it, if you may ask.
No objection, Your Honor.
376.
Yes, sir.
376 is admitted.
And I think it's the only exhibit I'm using today that has not been admitted at this point, Your Honor, so it should flow fairly easily. Have you seen this document, Dr. Wren?
Yes, sir.
And this is a toxicology report from the journal, and it talks about elevated CPK levels after hydrazine inhalation exposure in an F-16 aircraft technician. This is the article we were just speaking about, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And if you go to the case report, which is on the first page, paragraph number 2, it says case report. It indicates here the second to last line, it says the exposure time was less than 1 minute. You see that?
Yes, sir.
We can agree, and since you've said this already, this person, this airman who suffered acute liver injury,
Yes, sir.
as opposed to failure, had a 1 minute exposure. Would you agree that every plaintiff in this case had more than 1 minute worth of exposure by virtue of consuming real water over weeks, if not months at a time?
Objection, plus for speculation beyond scope.
Again, I'm not a toxicologist, so I think there's a lot of factors that go into that with dosing and things like that, which I'm not a toxicologist, but to answer your question of did they have more than 1 minute of exposure, very likely so.
And the last, let's go to the last page of this article. I want to talk about what the recommendations are at the end here. Last paragraph say, go up, chain please. Up, no, second page. There we go. Last paragraph on the right column. We recommend that all physicians treating people exposed to hydrazine in industry, the Air Force or the Navy, be aware of the diversity in symptoms and consider the possibility of significant poisoning also in asymptomatic patients. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Now, a little while ago, you went through all 5 children, and you said that based upon the information you have, you believe that they're all okay because you've not seen anything saying otherwise, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that you could have liver damage and not know it?
Initially, yes, sir.
In fact, you can have liver damage and have tests, liver function tests that say you're okay, correct?
I'm sorry, can you explain that a little bit more, sir?
Sure. Isn't it true that you can have liver damage despite having what appears to be normal liver function tests?
So I believe when you say liver function tests, you mean the AST and ALT, and yes, sir, you can have some instances in which the AST, ALT can be normal, and that you can still have long-term liver injury. But I would say in those cases, if you have long-term liver injury, you should have some other signs, physical signs or symptoms of that, or imaging. I believe, as I said, if you had cirrhosis, you would, so for example, you have cirrhosis, you usually, that's not a, you usually have imaging findings of cirrhosis, even if you have normal liver enzymes.
Yes, sir. So do you disagree with this recommendation, this report?
No, sir, because this report just says, they recommend that we are aware of the diversity of symptoms and that it should be considered even if someone is asymptomatic. I would say I would take this with the point of its initial exposure to it, or an acute exposure to it. I don't know if this report is trying to extrapolate, and I wouldn't dare to extrapolate that to saying, well, what happens after that exposure has been removed? I'm not too sure what they're saying, what the recommendations are with regards to that.
All right. Let's look at Exhibit 342. This is also an abstract from 1971. This deals with a machinist who was exposed to hydrazine once per week for, I believe, 6 months. Is that your recollection of this article?
Yes, sir, that's what it says in the abstract.
And is it fair to say that this person suffered similar symptomology as the plaintiffs in this case?
By symptoms you mean cough, fever, diarrhea, vomiting, icterus, and stupor. I think some of them, yes, sir.
Right. And is it fair to say that this person, after being admitted to the hospital, actually died of exposure to hydrazine?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, that's what the abstract says.
And so you and I both know, based upon this report, this abstract, that hydrazine, as I said before, will cause fibrosis, bridging fibrosis, cirrhosis, and death, correct?
I think that's a possibility, yes, sir. And this abstract seems to be one that, to your point, is linking the exposure of hydrazine to an unfortunate incident where someone died from it. Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that when you were deposed in this case, you indicated that you had not reviewed these articles before preparing your report? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Again, I'm not a toxicologist, and so as a clinical pediatric hepatologist, my focus is on liver health and the subsequent follow-up from an episode of acute liver failure.
Sure. Is it also fair to say that you never requested the slides for Severin's biopsy?
Yes, sir. I'm not a pathologist, and so rely on the reports of the records I was given.
And you didn't request the slides for Hera Carrier's biopsy, correct?
That is correct.
When was the last time you reviewed any medical records for any of the children?
Just last night, sir, just to make sure I was updated and refreshed to the best of my ability about each of the cases.
No, I'm talking about up-to-date records. Have you asked for any records from the children in the last 6 months, for example,
I've just reviewed what has been provided to me, sir.
from your attorney?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Let me have you take a look at, are you familiar with an article called General Criteria for Transplantation in Children?
It sounds like very generic articles. I'd have to look at it or know who the authors were to really answer that.
It's funny you should say that. You're the author. It's chapter 24 of the book that I found.
Oh, so, yes, as a chapter, yes.
You know what I'm talking about now?
Yes, sir, in the book, Liver Transplantation.
Yes. And I'm not asking for this document to be an exhibit to your deposition, but is it fair to say that you said in this book, or this chapter, at present, every child with ALF and associated hepatic encephalopathy should be evaluated as a candidate. This was dealing with emergency transplantation. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
Were all of these children, when they were taken to primary children's hospital, being considered for transplantation?
It seemed like, yes, sir, that the part of the reason why they were transferred to a transplant center at Primary Children's was to have the option of an evaluation for liver transplant, which I would say is a pretty standard of care for us, where if you have an episode of acute liver failure, as a physician and as a parent, I would want my child at a transplant center should that be necessary.
But that's a testament of how sick they were when they arrived, right?
Oh, yes, sir. And pediatric acute liver failure is a very serious condition.
And is it fair to say that children with ALF can develop hepatic coma and irreversible brain damage, which would be a contraindication to perform transplantation?
Yes, sir. I believe you're quoting out of the textbook, if I recall correctly. And what I mean by that is, if you go back to the definition of pediatric acute liver failure, and I had said, we look at that INR, that clotting number time, to say it's either greater than 2 is the definition of acute liver failure, or greater than 1.5 with hepatic encephalopathy or some mental status changes. One of the main things we monitor for in acute liver failure is we know there's a risk of progression of your mental status or deterioration of your mental status. So, we want to really monitor closely at a transplant center, like you mentioned, sir, to make sure that there's no ongoing signs, progressive signs of mental status deterioration or mental changes. Because if there was, that would be an indication to pursue liver transplant. And there's that fine line, as that chapter says, where if you progress too far, then you don't become a candidate for a transplant. But what I would say is, once you recover from the episode of acute liver failure, that hepatic encephalopathy, coma, that means you've recovered from that episode and you're not at risk for developing those symptoms anymore once you recover.
Is it a fair statement, based on your review of the medical records, that several of these children suffered from hepatic encephalopathy?
Yes, sir. That's why part of the reason why they have, or why they have that diagnosis of acute liver failure.
And would you agree with me that if an expert came in here in front of this jury and said that she did not believe that any of these patients suffered hepatic encephalopathy, she would be wrong, wouldn't she?
It depends on the medical records, but again, hepatic encephalopathy is a spectrum, so not knowing what that expert said or what their, where on that spectrum they lie. And the reason why I say that, for example, is if you are sleepy and irritated, and again, encephalopathy is rated on a scale, right? And so it starts off with when the child's a little irritated. One of the hardest parts for us in pediatrics is, are you irritated because you have ongoing liver injury, or are you irritated because you've been stuck in a hospital and been monitoring you? I mean, it's so hard to tell, and so that's kind of on that more mild spectrum. But if you get to that sleepiness, fatigue, then that's definitively hepatic encephalopathy. But I think prior to, there's a cutoff for each clinician, where I would say, some would say, that irritability is definitely encephalopathy, and other people would say, that's not encephalopathy, and I think that's up to interpretation of the clinician, and again, having only reviewed the records and not being there, I wouldn't presume to say one way or another.
All right. But I'm asking you based upon your review of the medical records. I don't want you to second guess if it's not in the records. From your review of the medical records, did you see that, for example, Hera Carrier actually suffered from hepatic encephalopathy at Primary Children's Hospital?
I apologize, I don't remember that specifically, I'd have to review. Again, I think to your point, I know that London and Williams, I recall that they were both lethargic per report in the clinical records, and so I think taking that with the INR, to your point, that they had encephalopathy. Not trying to be difficult, I just don't remember the example that you gave me.
No worries, we can help. We can help. Let's take a look at Plaintiffs Exhibit, I believe it's Plaintiffs Exhibit 674, page 171. I believe it's been admitted, unless someone suggests otherwise. And before you put up, Shane, let me get confirmation from the court.
Oh, so that way.
Page 32.
832.
Page number.
You're corrected on my, I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
832, Shane, do you have that one?
It's a 3-page document, do you know which one?
Yes, the pages I'm looking at are 170, you want the base number or you want the original? The base number is 686, 272, and 216. If you want, I can stamp and show it to you. And Dr. Lynn, can you see that from the screen?
Yes, sir.
About 3 lines down, it says, and now presents with encephalopathy. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And does this help refresh your recollection of what you read before?
It's right there, so I would agree with what you said, that Hera Carrier presented with encephalopathy. Yes, sir.
And if we were to take a look at the next page, which is 272, second line down, you'll see this in a second. The second line says, if the encephalopathy worsens, you see that?
Yes, sir.
And then if you go down to problems, list, and plan, the second item says hepatic encephalopathy, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then finally, page 216 of this same exhibit. We'll get to that in a second. Last line of the first paragraph, Shane, you can highlight that. Last sentence, the first paragraph. Here requires PICU level care for monitoring for encephalopathy. You see that?
Yes, sir.
With frequent neural examinations due to her initial risk of acute decompensation. You see that?
Yes, sir.
So if an expert came in and said that they did not, that Hera did not suffer from hepatic encephalopathy based on the records, that expert would be wrong, correct?
Based on these records, I would say Hera has encephalopathy. Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this question too. Is it appropriate for a is a neuropsychologist the type of doctor that would normally determine hepatic encephalopathy?
No, sir. It would be either a hepatologist or a neurologist or some combination of the treatment team. And what I mean by that is, when you have acute liver failure, like I mentioned, it's a very serious condition. You're in the intensive care unit for monitoring for the most parts. And so that treatment team, whether it's the intensivist, the hepatology person, physician involved, some teams have a neurologist. I don't know how primary children's team is composed. Those would be the team members that would be assessing for hepatic encephalopathy.
Your Honor, before I move to another completely different subject and a new patient, you want to approach about?
Sure. So ladies and gentlemen, it's about 12:30, so we'll go ahead and break for lunch. Come back at 1:45. During this recess, you're admonished not to talk to the person amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this trial. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial or any person connected with this trial by any medium of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspaper, television, internet, radio. Do not visit the scene of any events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any investigation. Do not do any posting communications on any social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until the case file is submitted to you. See you back at 1:45.
Please rise for the jury.
Like I said, closed yesterday. We need to finalize jury instructions. We got some updated ones, I guess, but we also need to make sure everybody's on the same page. What I usually do, is Ms. Rivera will go over off the record, make sure, because sometimes emails go back and forth and we're not sure exactly where everything's at. But we need to do that, and so whether that's right now or whether you want to come here at 1, those are kind of our options.
Your Honor, what I submitted to Ms. Rivera earlier was the red line version of the compensatory jury instructions. I've given those to Real Waters Counsel. They've reviewed it. It's my understanding that a lot of those little issues are going to be resolved, but I'm just waiting for confirmation on what exactly the issues are, and then we'll be prepared to address them.
Your Honor, Matthew Kaufmann for Real Water. Just very briefly, Mr. Pepperman's right. I apologize. I've been focused on presenting Dr. Lynn today, and once I indicated to Mr. Pepperman, once Dr. Lynn's off the stand, him and I are going to step out, and I do believe we'll be able to iron out almost all the issues, if not all the issues, with the compensatory jury instructions.
So I'm not sure what that means. So in terms, so let me be a little more clear. So we need to finish these today, as I think I indicated yesterday. And so what you're saying, does that mean you need some other amount of time or some other time, or what do you mean in terms of we need to finish today? How are we gonna do that?
We will be good. I honestly think if Mr. Pepperman and I talked for like 15-20 minutes, we could iron out the compensatory issue. As to the punitive instruction, I believe the agreement is we are going to agree to disagree and submit that to the court. So that is something we will have to address with the court.
Sure. Do I have the punitive damages? Okay. Just these two?
I believe so, sir. I can't read it from you.
Yes, Your Honor. We have 2 instructions, and I believe Real Water has 1.
Okay. Yeah, that's easy. So that, and then, so that is, I mean, yeah, this is, so we can hammer that out quickly. Not right now, because I'll need to look at them. In terms of the compensatory issue, do you want to talk right now while we're on a break, or do you want to?
Josh can suggest that since after Dr. Woodward will play a video, why don't they do it during the video? And then we can go over the same time.
I think that's a fair suggestion. As long as it's a
How
video.
long is the video?
We have videos ranging from 10 to 40 minutes, so we can play whatever one we think is appropriate. I think if Mr. Pepperman and I spent 10, maybe 15 minutes max, I'll be able to figure this out. And I'm being conservative here.
We'll come back at 1:10, I guess, and I'll give you a ruling on punitive damages, or we'll talk about it. And then on the break, when you start playing videos, I'm gonna have to rule on the break, you know, what I'm gonna do, so have that ready for me, I guess, because in case it hasn't come through yet. And I repeat myself, but we need to get this done like today before we leave, and we're leaving around 5. So I don't know, however you all want to figure it out is fine, but I can't emphasize that enough. I tried to yesterday, so I'll see you at 1:10.
Just for the court's information, the punitive damages instructions that I dispute, those relate to the amount phase, the phase 2.
We have time on that.
Yeah, so if your honor doesn't want to rush over the lunch hour to review those, we do have time on them.
Oh, so this would be phase 2 instruction, and they
Phase
come
2.
back with a yes on it.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
I'll take a look.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, can I give this now to your?
Oh, yeah, no, thank you.
That's right.
Let's talk about the punitive ones, because I'll tell you what I'm inclined to do, but definitely welcome input. So, when I was reviewing the phase 2 punitive instructions, comparing defendants with plaintiffs, I thought seeing defendants compared to plaintiffs, defendants longer, more thorough, so to speak, and then I thought, well, wait a second, we're talking about phase 2, is there a phase 1 instruction? There is, through phase 1. So I think defendants' proposed one is repetitive in large part to what we already have agreed to in phase 1. And I think that was the major difference between the two, so I'd be inclined to get plaintiffs simply because defendants is almost, it's not duplicative of the phase 1, but a lot of those paragraphs are already in the phase 1 portion. But if I'm wrong, definitely let me know.
Yes, sir. I just want to pull up the stock instruction. The one side on So, Your Honor, there's 2 issues.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Yeah. The one I think it puts together. Yeah, so this is, and I don't know, but this is the printed version, right, that you got this morning?
Yes.
Yeah, so page 29 of the red line printed copy you got. Has the definitions of malice, oppression, fraud, conscious disregard. Okay, so I cut you off, Mr. Odou.
No, no worries, Ron. I'm still pulling up so that's not the issue that's in dispute. I'm pulling up the two issues that are in dispute. Just need a second. Unfortunately, I have a whole bunch of papers in front of me and it's not the right one. Okay, I now have it in front of me. So if we look at the stock jury instructions from 2018 Nevada Pattern Jury Instructions 12.1, talks about punitive damages, recovery, and measure. And I agree with the court. What the court's observation was, which is in the first phase, we already have the instruction ends at the definition of conscious disregard.
Mm-hmm.
The dispute is as to the punitive damages phase. So just as Mr. Kemp said, our dispute is over the instruction to the jury if there is a punitive damages phase. I'm prepared to move forward on those. I want to make sure the court's okay with that.
Yeah, although I'm not sure, so I got, do you have the document, defendants proposed jury instruction for phase 2, amount of punitive damages?
Yes, Your Honor, that is our proposed instruction follows the pattern jury instruction. The plaintiffs have added some things and taken away some things. And in particular, just so there's no mystery, the plaintiffs' proposed instruction for phase 2 on page 2 starts off with there's no fixed standard for determining, that's right out of the pattern jury instruction. And the next paragraph is where there's a difference. The plaintiffs say the amount of punitive damages award is not to compensate the plaintiffs for harm suffered, but is reasonably necessary to punish and deter the defendant, and then they added the words, and others from engaging in conduct. The reason and others is there is because the plaintiffs will argue that that is the referring statute for punitive damages. The issue that we have raised and the issue that we have somewhat briefed to the court is the constitutional issue and punishing others not before this tribunal. Now, I know the plaintiffs have drawn a distinction. They've said it's okay to punish others within the state of Nevada, not outside the state of Nevada. Then this goes to the issue of plaintiffs arguing to send a message to other followers, other water companies. We've objected to that. And this issue then, I guess, concludes or culminates with the deleted language from paragraph 2 from the stock instruction, where the stock instruction has the words, the amount of punitive damages which will serve the purposes of punishment and deterrence, taking into account the defendant's financial condition. So, Your Honor, the reason why these two additions, one addition and one subtraction, is important is because the plaintiffs intend to argue what they've done throughout the course of this trial, that there should be $1 billion verdict for punitive damages because they want to send a message to the Dasanis, the Coca-Colas, the Pepsis, the Fiji Water, all bottled water companies outside of this case and send a message that this conduct is, they will say reprehensible, they will use those types of terms. But basically, since day one, when we started with jury selection, they had been asking this jury to award damages for $1 billion. And they went through great pains throughout the course of this case to precondition the jury for damages of $1 billion. And every chance they've gotten, they've tried to draw comparisons, and this goes to the brief that was filed. I'm not going to do that unless the court wants to. They've drawn comparisons between real water and Heinz ketchup and Young Brands and McDonald's and all of these very large companies to precondition this jury to make a very large award, not only of punitive damages, but of compensatory damages. They have argued that these things go to reprehensibility. We have argued that those things are beyond the scope of what is constitutionally permitted, and that the drafters of the model pattern jury instruction did not include the word "and others." And they will point to the statute and they'll say, well, the statute talks about others. As the court could probably tell, we've had this argument a couple of times now.
So that leads to a question that I meant to ask. What did my two other colleagues do?
So your two other colleagues wrestled with the issue and ultimately, I think the plaintiffs would say, decided in their favor, but there were some nuances in those decisions. Judge Dishner relied upon the language of the statute. When we argued this in front of Judge Williams, the arguments weren't as developed. I'm just being very candid with the court. But I think, or we think, Rowater thinks, more importantly, Rowater thinks, this is an incredibly important issue that we want to get right. And we think that it is inappropriate to start arguing about punishment and deterrence of others. It takes away from what has been put on as evidence in this court and goes beyond that. And now we're talking about punishment of very, very large multi-billion-dollar corporations. And we think that's improper. And Your Honor, I would also point out that there have been now 2 awards, and I don't want to get too far down the road on this, but there have been 2 awards for punitive damages punishing Real Water, and the plaintiffs have conceded that because of the bankruptcy, Real Water is dead. And so the purpose of punishment and deterrence of Real Water really is not served by any punitive damages award. And so we think there's a threshold issue that's never been addressed by any court in the country, frankly, that we've seen, and we've again argued this 3 times, that can you award punitive damages against a dead corporation, which they concede Real Water is dead. Eventually, some appellate court may decide that issue, but that is a threshold issue. And I guess, again, I don't want to steal the plaintiff's thunder, but they will argue about insurance and collateral source and punishing insurance companies, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why that is irrelevant and why that doesn't matter is because, again, the punitive damage is focused on punishing and deterring the defendant, not some insurance company, not bad faith issues that are not before this court and all of these other tangential issues. So I've kind of tried to encapsulate for the court why it's an important issue and why it's a big issue, and only scratch the surface of the arguments, and I don't mean to try and argue for the plaintiffs, but I just wanted the court to know this is the ballpark we're arguing in.
So, because it did throw, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but it's a bit thrown off, when I'm comparing the 2, and the thing that stood out, which is right at the face of it, is your proposed phase 2 has all those definitions that are already in phase 1.
Right.
So I think what you're saying, but I want to make sure I understand. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, let me know. But it seems like you don't have an objection if, looking at plaintiffs, you wouldn't have an objection if we took the phrase "and others" out and we added at the end the taking into account the defendant's financial condition. Is that fair? Or?
Your Honor, I think that is fair. I think the concern that we had, again, is that this case, if there's a punitive damage stage, we anticipate maybe they'll put on evidence this time. They didn't in the, let me rephrase that.
So
maybe they'll put on
you
additional
answered my
evidence.
question.
I am trying to, Your Honor. It's good to remind the jury this is the purpose of the punitive damages. That's why we had it listed a second time.
Okay. So I'm not going to repeat, the definitions, so that part's easy. We are about at the time the jury was supposed to come back. Give me the brief, if you can, 2-3 minute spiel for plaintiffs on this. I don't know that I'm gonna decide it right now.
Basically, Mr. Revere is asking you to violate a Nevada Supreme Court case in the longstanding tradition here. The Nevada Supreme Court case we talked about is Ace Trucking. If I can read the holding in Ace Trucking. The proper end of punitive damages is to punish and deter culpable conduct. Punishment and deterrence, and more specifically, this is a direct quote from the case, quote, punitive damages provide a means by which the community, usually through a jury, can express community outrage or distaste for the misconduct of an oppressive, fraudulent, or malicious defendant, and by, quote, which others may be deterred and warned that such conduct will not be tolerated, unquote. I'll read it again. Quote, by which others may be deterred and warned that such conduct will not be tolerated, unquote. And so we made this exact same argument in the Gallagher case. Judge Williams has the language, others may be deterred. We made it to Judge Kishner. She basically issued the exact same instruction we're proposing here. And so what they're asking you is to make a fundamental change in Nevada law and to limit punitive solely to punishment, okay? And his comment that there's no Nevada cases, when we filed the motions for summary judgment on this point, we cited the 2 Nevada cases that hold that just because you file bankruptcy or you say that the corporation's insolvent, that doesn't get you out of punitive damages. There's not one, there's 2 Nevada cases that we cite on that. Now moving
What's Ace Trucking citation? What are those?
Ace Trucking, Eric, you have that?
While he's looking for that, what are the 2?
Those are in our brief, Your Honor. I don't have the brief right now. So, and you know, Your Honor, like I said earlier, this is not something that should be decided, you know, without some reflection, and I think we have time to decide this. So I don't mind arguing this as many times as the court wants while the jury's deliberating the first part. You got the site here?
746 P 2nd, 132, 1987.
That's the Bedrock case.
Ace Trucking Equipment Rentals v. Kaufmann.
What was the year again, sorry?
1987.
Look for those 2 bankruptcy ones.
That's in our bench brief.
Or even if you
It's in, let me
find
find
the date of that bench brief.
It's not a bench brief, it's a summary judgment,
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. And so, Your Honor, I want the record to reflect that Mr. Odou has not asked for the Philip Morris instruction. Because I've already said at the bench once, I've said other times, if he asked for that instruction, he's entitled to that instruction. And so he has not asked for it, so that's not an issue in the case. But if you take a look at the Philip Morris case, what that case held, and again, that's the tobacco case, so it came out of the Oregon Supreme Court, and the Oregon Supreme Court basically allowed the plaintiffs to argue, oh, they've evicted 240 million people, you gotta punish them. Okay, so what that case held is that that argument was okay to establish reprehensibility, but not for punishment. So if he asked for Philip Morris instruction, that's what it would say. All right, but he's not asking for that. But I think just looking at that case shows you that punishment, or excuse me, deterrence is an appropriate area, even under the view of the United States Supreme Court. We're governed by the Nevada Supreme Court, the Ace Trucking case, but even the United States Supreme Court says it's okay. They just limit it by allowing a Philip Morris instruction, what I'm calling Philip Morris instruction, if it's requested. Hasn't been proposed, hasn't been requested. But Your Honor, with regards to deterrence, there is absolutely no doubt that that is allowed under Nevada law. The argument that we need this award to deter others. And that's exactly what Judge Kistner found and Judge Williams found. And I think in the bench brief, we actually gave you the transcript of the argument in front of both of those. Did we not? I'm pretty sure we did, Your Honor. That was a couple of weeks ago we filed that. Yeah.
Blends together.
Yeah, it all blends together, Your Honor. But if you read those arguments, you'll see they pretty much say just what I've said.
Well, we'll have to talk some more.
Okay. Yeah, Your Honor, I think it's a weighty decision, Your Honor. I think.
Oh, well, he's good. Go ahead. I glanced through Mr. Parker's bench brief. We'll have to talk about that later, but one question that wasn't answered, if I were to agree that, okay, plaintiffs say they don't want a mistrial, they want a curative instruction, that then begs the question, what curative instruction, and I didn't see one with that, so think about that.
That's true, Your Honor.
Please rise for the jury. Please be seated.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your service and patience. Are we ready to continue?
No,
Come on up, Doctor.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Dr. Wren, are you prepared to go forward?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Wren, we left off talking about one of the chapters you participated in or authored.
Yes, sir.
I want to move to another document. This is, you may also recognize this, you contributed to this article as well. You've heard of the Journal of Pediatrics, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you recall a article titled Frailty in Children with Liver Disease,
Yes, sir.
a prospective multi-center study.
Yes, sir.
Did you contribute to that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you know whether or not, well, first describe to the jury what frailty means in the context of liver disease.
So frailty as a concept is thinking of if you have any sort of chronic or long-term condition, how does that impact the rest of the body? And in particular, thinking about muscle mass, muscle tone, things like that. But I would say the key thing there is we're looking at it in children with long-term chronic conditions.
And the frailty, there's a frailty test, correct?
Yes, sir. There's a measure that's been developed by a team.
Right. And originally this was developed to measure frailty in adults, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then this article talks about transitioning this approach to children, correct?
Yes, sir. It's exploring applying that approach to children. Yes, sir.
All right. Do you know whether or not any of the children in this case have had a form of frailty test before?
Not to my knowledge, from what I saw in the chart review.
Based upon this article that you contributed to, a frailty test could be helpful in determining how the children are developing since their acute liver failure, correct?
Not necessarily. The distinction I would make is that that test, the intention of that article was applying it to chronic or long-term liver conditions. And in cases of acute liver failure, by definition, acute, it's more of a short term. So I wouldn't suppose how to apply that.
Right. Could a frailty test be used to determine whether or not any of these children are suffering from potentially long-term or permanent effects of hydrazine poisoning?
Honestly, I'm not sure, because when you use a test, you can always use a test and get a result. I think the hard part is knowing how to interpret that result. And my understanding of the literature and how that test has been used, it just hasn't been applied in those instances.
Is it fair to say that you're not aware of any tests that Real Water may have done on the children or that have been done on the children, period, to determine if they're suffering any permanent effects that can be tested by this frailty approach?
Can you explain what you mean by permanent effects?
Sure. We've had testimony now from a board-certified pathologist, from a board-certified gastroenterologist and hepatologist, indicating that there could be permanent damage, or actually opining that there is more likely than not permanent damage to all of these children's livers. Were you aware of that?
Yes, sir, based off the testimony in Wren.
Could permanent liver damage affect a child's growth and progression?
In isolation, permanent liver damage can impact growth and progression, as you say.
Yes, sir. And if you were to use a frailty test potentially on a child, potentially you could evaluate that child to see if any permanent liver injury has affected that child. Correct?
No, sir, I don't believe that that's how that frailty test is intended to be used.
So whether or not you can apply it to an acute liver failure, you're not sure. But in terms of what you've been testifying to by Dr. Hudson and Dr. Datnow, you are aware of the fact that there have been expert opinions given that these children have suffered more probably than not permanent liver injury.
I'm aware that that's their opinion, but as a pediatric transplant hepatologist, I would say my experience is that after acute liver failure, assuming that you resolve from that incident, based on the things we reviewed before, looking at the labs, the overall clinical picture, is that once that episode has resolved, and again, not taking away from the fact that the child has definitely suffered from acute liver failure, but there's not a chronicity component to that, as you say.
But you're basing your opinion that they've resolved because you've not seen any later tests indicating that they have abnormal liver tests, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what the medical records say.
All right. Have you heard of an article called Misconception? You can't have liver disease with normal liver chemistries. Have you heard of that?
It sounds familiar, but I need a refresher on it.
The basic conclusion is that although you can have normal liver values, that does not mean that the liver has not suffered permanent damage. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement in isolation, but again, I would take a look at the bigger picture because the question to me becomes, how do you determine if they've had permanent liver damage? And if you're just looking at liver enzymes, yes, that absolutely can be the case. But you also, again, every individual is different. You have to take a look at how are they clinically doing, what physical signs and symptoms do they have, what imaging do they have.
I believe the conclusion of the article was that although lowering ATL may improve the detection of liver disease, some patients may still have chronic liver disease and even cirrhosis despite ALT values within reference ranges. You've heard of that, haven't you?
Yes, sir. What that article, I believe, is alluding to, without getting into too much detail, is ALT, that blood test. It's actually made by hepatocytes, your liver cells. And so what happens if you have really severe liver disease is once those cells get so inflamed, they burn out. And so think of it as if your body is if those liver cells are making ALT, when you're injured, they're angry. They're making a lot of ALT. But once injury gets to the point where that liver cell stops functioning, you're not making any other ALT. So in fact, what you see in long-term liver damage is initially you have rising high ALTs, but then actually one of the things we're most concerned about is if we see that ALT dropping with other markers rising. So if the ALT is dropping, but your INR is going up, yeah, absolutely I'm worried you have ongoing liver disease. But I don't think that applies to these cases in particular.
And so, and I'm not asking you to base your opinion solely on the ALTs. I think you've told this jury that the gold standard is the biopsy, correct?
Gold standard for what, sir?
For determining the condition of the liver.
For looking at liver fibrosis, yes, but not liver function.
Okay. And so, you're familiar with the Loma Linda article, are you not?
Can you please give me a refresher, sir?
Sure. The Loma Linda article was placed in the American Journal of Gastroenterology. If you could, it's Exhibit 8, Your Honor. I'd like to show the witness. Sure. Shane, if you could, please. Does this reflect your recollection?
Oh, yes, sir.
All right. And what's your understanding of this article?
My understanding is that this is summarizing episodes of acute liver failure that occur in individuals who consume alkaline water, and in this case, real water, sir.
All right. And let's go to the Table 1, if you could. Now, this table reflects that 4 patients having consumed real water suffered acute liver failure, correct? If you want me to go back to
Yes,
the beginning
yes,
of the
sir,
article.
yes.
All right. And they were all biopsy, correct?
Yes, there's a histology row right there, yes, sir.
All right. Patient number 1 had a 2-week exposure to real water. Do you see that?
Yes, sir, saw that.
And had an ALT of 2714, and, I'm sorry, AST of 2714, and an ALT of 2087. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And if you go down to histology, it says fibrosis, paracellular cellular fibrosis, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, each one of these patients were biopsied, and 3 of the 4 actually mentioned fibrosis. 1 periportal, that's patient number 3, and then patient number 4, bridging fibrosis, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what it says.
And so, based upon this article, 3 out of 4 consumers of real water suffered acute liver failure and suffered fibrosis, correct?
3 out of 4 of these patients, yes, sir.
All right. Now, we also know that Severin Morales was biopsied, correct?
Yes, there's a biopsy report, yes, sir.
All right. And we know that Hera Carrier was also biopsied, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. So, did you review the testimony of Dr. Datnow on his?
Yes, sir.
And Dr. Datnow found that Severin Morales not only suffered fibrosis, but suffered what type of fibrosis, Dr. Wren?
Well, I believe he said bridging fibrosis and possibly cirrhosis. That was his opinion, sir.
Did he say possibly cirrhosis, or did he in fact say cirrhotic nodules?
Well, so are you referring to his testimony or his deposition?
No, trial testimony in front of this jury.
Because I believe there are 2 different things from what I read. So,
Okay. Well, let's just show the jury what Dr. Datnow said, and you tell me if you read the same thing. Shane, could you please play that?
So Severin has bridging fibrosis in the November 2020 slides that I reviewed. He has multiple nodules in that area. Cirrhotic nodules. Bridging fibrosis is permanent. Cirrhotic nodules is 1 step further, and that's permanent. I've never seen bridging fibrosis or cirrhotic nodules in a child. Certainly on the 22-month-old, bridging fibrosis is abnormal no matter what the age is. And it's scarring, it's permanent, and it's caused by something killing off the liver cells, and the body is trying to regenerate by with scar tissue, and that's bad for the liver.
So, did you see this testimony before, or hear this testimony before?
no, sir.
First time.
First time seeing it, yes, sir.
And you know that he is a board-certified pathologist, correct?
Yes, sir. That's what his resume says.
The type of pathologist that you rely upon to actually discern what a biopsy depicts, correct?
Yes, sir. And I typically work at pediatric pathologists.
And so, Dr. Datnow has not only indicated fibrosis, but he's taken into bridging fibrosis and cirrhotic nodules, correct?
That's what he said, yes, sir.
And based upon that testimony and the Loma Linda report, would you agree with me that in the biopsies that we're aware of in this case, there's been 75% of the biopsies we've considered have shown some form of fibrosis?
I think I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure I follow the math, sir, because I believe what you're saying is that the case has, the Loma Linda report, 3 out of 4 reports say fibrosis, and the 2 cases in these instances, Severin, Morales, and Hera Carey had biopsies, and 1 out of the 2 have fibrosis. Is that what you're saying, sir?
Right. Well, we don't know about Ms. Carey because we don't have the biopsy in front of us. The biopsy slide in front of us.
There was a report I read, so I'm not too sure. The same way how we read the report on the Loma Linda report, that's how I would choose to interpret that. So that's why I'm not sure I follow how you're getting to that math, sir.
Well, let me make sure we're clear. Real Water didn't bring a pathologist here that you're aware of, correct?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
They didn't hire a board-certified pathologist to come in and examine the Loma Linda report for you, correct?
No, sir.
The only certified, board-certified pathologist has been presented by the plaintiffs trying to discuss these slides, correct?
To my knowledge, yes, sir.
All right, so we rely on board-certified pathology. We have the Loma Linda results, and we have Severin Morales, correct?
Does that include the clinical reports that we reviewed? I guess I'm not following your line of questioning, sir.
Okay. Do you have any other board-certified opinions on any slides in this case?
The only opinion I've read is that of Dr. Defendants.
Thank you. Good enough. And so if you rely on Dr. Datnow, the only board-certified pathologist presented to this jury, we have Severin's results, and then we have the fibrosis identified in 3 to 4 out of the Loma Linda, correct?
Sure, in terms of reported literature, yes, sir.
Perfect. And if we do that, and we simply apply the math, it would be more than 60%. I think it'd be, my percentage would be somewhere closer to 80% likelihood that every child has suffered some form of permanency, we'll strike that, some form of fibrosis as a result of consuming real water.
I think if you choose to look at it that way, you can, but again, to your point, not everyone has had a liver biopsy, so I wouldn't presume to speculate to that degree.
You know, I appreciate that, Dr. Lynn. What you just said to me made a lot of sense, but I want to make sure I understand it fully. Are you saying to this jury that because there's not a biopsy on everyone, that you cannot say, you're unable to say that they have not suffered some form of fibrosis?
Well, the gold standard is a liver biopsy, yes, sir, so I think you could look at it either way based off of what you just said.
Perfect. You read the MMWR report, correct, Dr. Lynn?
I believe so. Can you refresh my memory?
Sure, it's Exhibit 1. I'll let you take a look at it real quick.
Yes, sir.
And if we go down a little bit further, Shane, please. The last paragraph on the right starts out with the word clinical. Right above that, the last 3 to 4 lines of that paragraph right above it. You're aware of the fact that one of the consumers of real water, 60-year-old plus woman, died as a result of acute liver failure, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what that says.
All right. So we know about the death in the article we talked about right before lunch, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we know about this death, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say, doctor, that you don't know how much hydrazine it takes for someone to develop acute liver failure?
Objection beyond the scope.
I'm not a toxicologist, so no, I do not.
I'm sorry.
No, I do not. I'm not a toxicologist.
But what you do know is that these children all had enough to suffer acute liver failure, correct?
Yes, acute liver failure. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, I believe you said before we went to lunch that you're aware of the fact that Merrick and London both suffered encephalopathy, correct?
Yes, sir. That's what their records say.
And was it your recollection also that Severin Morales suffered encephalopathy?
Yes, sir.
How about Christopher Noah Wren? Do you know if he suffered encephalopathy?
I apologize. I don't recall, sir.
So the best of your recollection sitting here today, at least 4 of the 5 children all suffered encephalopathy.
Yes, sir.
In terms of the slides that Dr. Datnow looked at, did you ever look at those slides, the ones that he was referring to during that testimony that I just showed you, Dr. Flynn?
No, sir.
If I showed you those slides, would that assist you in either agreeing with Dr. Datnow, or do you feel you're perhaps not qualified since you're not a pathologist to give an opinion one way or the other.
And I'm not a pathologist, so I would not feel qualified, sir.
Oh, good. And did you hear the testimony of Dr. Hudson and what he said about the permanency of the injuries to these children's livers?
I have not seen or read the transcript, sir.
Right. Shane, can you play that portion of Dr. Hudson, please?
Page 109, Mr. Parker?
I believe so. Let me confirm it for you, Shane. It is page 109. It's 109.
Situation, irreversible scarring. How quickly that progresses to a liver transplant is variable, but it always progresses.
Okay, so let's go to your next. And this is your opinion as to London Williams. Do you recall doing London's medical records?
Yes, sir, I did.
109, I don't know if that's correct, James. 109, 914 through 110, 5. You ended at the beginning. You started at the end of that.
At some point, that is an irreversible situation, irreversible scarring. How quickly that...
Your Honor, can we give him 1 second? Sure. It'll just be a second, I don't.
Yes, sir.
I want to go back to what we were just talking about. I read testimony from Dr. Datton, and you recall reading that, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And Dr. Datton testimony, sworn testimony before this jury, who was certified pathologist, was that he saw cirrhotic nodules in severance biopsy sites.
Yes, sir.
All right. I want to distance you for a second from severance. We just talk about your general experience. Understood?
I understand.
In your experience as a board certified hepatologist, when you've seen those types of cirrhotic nodules, has that ever indicated the need for some form of liver transplant?
At some point, that is an irreversible situation, irreversible scarring. How quickly that progresses to a liver transplant is variable, but it always progresses. At some point, that is an irreversible situation, irreversible scarring. How quick?
Thank you, Jim. First time hearing Dr. Hudson's opinion on this?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with Dr. Hudson that cirrhotic nodules are irreversible, permanent injuries on the liver?
Yes, by definition, cirrhosis is irreversible. Yes, sir.
Which means that Severin Morales, provided Dr. Datnow is correct, has suffered an irreversible insult or injury to his liver, correct?
Yes, by histology, but I would also say I would look at the clinical picture as well, because cirrhosis is not just a finding on liver biopsy. When you have cirrhosis, you can see imaging findings showing cirrhosis. You can have other physical signs and symptoms. And so, again, with the records I was provided, I didn't see mention of that. So strictly off of Dr. Datnow, I agree with you, sir, and that cirrhosis was seen on histology, but I'm not sure with the bigger picture, sir.
And listen, Dr. Lynn, I'm not critical of you not being a pathologist. You're a pediatric hepatologist, not a pathologist, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
But you rely on board-certified pathologists, as you said previously, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And given what Dr. Datnoff testified to under oath, and what Dr. Hudson has testified to under oath, if that's correct, we know that's the type of medical or clinical information you rely upon, then Sever Morales' condition will continue to progress and ultimately could lead to a transplant.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach